Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to be ranking every Ark creature beginning with C in alphabetical order. But just before we get into it, make sure to like and subscribe as it really helps out the channel. So, firstly is the Carnotaurus. This is one of Ark's most recent creatures, and it is definitely a creature that you should tame at some point. This is essentially the Giga on absolute steroids. This thing is insane for so many reasons, which I'll talk about in just a second, but there's something about the Carnotaurus as well which makes it so much better than the Giga. This thing has way more stamina than the Giga, and if you do level it up, it will actually do something, unlike on the Giga where it will level up by like 5 or 10 each time. The Giga's stamina is absolutely atrocious, and also the Carnotaurus is a lot faster than the Giga as well, which really does provide a reasonable benefit, as it is so much easier to move around on this thing and so much nicer to move around on this thing. Its only real disadvantage compared to the Giga is its taming method can be a bit buggy sometimes and can be a bit annoying, but personally from my part I actually enjoy it a lot, and also I do have a guide on how to tame one if you were looking on how to tame one if you don't know how to tame one yourself. Also, in terms of damage, these things are better than the Giga when in a Blood Rage state. Not in base damage, but their Blood Rage they will gain when they kill creatures, which really does make them worth it. And also, they have absolutely no rage meter, which means these things are so nice to use. I'll give them a 9 out of 10. Next, we have the Carnotaurus. Definitely an old Ark creature that has been around for absolutely ages and really is an amazing creature from my perspective. Actually, when I had Genesis Part 1 for the first time, I had a Carnotaurus called Meatball, and I still remember it to this day as it was one of the best tames I ever had obtained, and it was very sad when that died, and then it went on to be Meatball 2, Meatball 3. You know how it goes if you go through a stage of a great name for the Carnotaurus, because actually in Latin Carnotaurus does mean meatball, which is why I called it Meatball in the first place. Also, if you did watch Squid's Ark series, then you'll think of the Carnotaurus very fondly as well, as Carney Dave was definitely a complete highlight of that series. But in terms of the Carnotaurus nowadays, it is significantly better than when it came out all the way back in 2015. Its left click attack will deal huge amounts of damage considering the Carno's size, and its left click will deal bleed damage, which is really overpowered, and it's so nice to see on these creatures, as something like a Rex doesn't even have a bleed ability, which really is a shame, and it really does show you how overpowered the bleed ability is, as it can absolutely shred through so many creatures. Also, the Carno's saddle is unlocked at a similar time to the Allo, which means this thing is really versatile from a early perspective of your Ark journey. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Next up, we have the Castoroides. This is also one of the go-to creatures in my opinion for gathering cementing paste. This thing isn't going to gather cementing paste, but their beaver dams from wild beavers, that is just the go-to place for cementing paste for me. I know I have given the Beelzebufo a bad rep, and personally I don't really want to spend the time taming a Beelzebufo and getting a really good one to use in the insect caves. Yes, after all of that prep they may gather more, but these things are really much more convenient if you're trying to get that cementing paste. Except you'll probably want yourself a flyer, as the beavers can be definitely very aggressive when you start raiding their dams. But if you have a farm of some wild ones, it can be really great, and it is just an insane way of gathering loads of cementing paste. But if you do want to tame yourself a Castoroides, they're actually not a bad shout either. I'm pretty sure their saddle works as a portable smithy. It might not though, don't quote me on that, but I think I remember it having something like that. But either way, these things are great wood gatherers, which is just really nice because wood is essential. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Next up, we have the Chalak Ethereum. These things have one of the weirdest taming methods in Ark and are definitely an oddity and some may say an underrated creature. Overall, I am pretty indifferent to these things. I don't really hate them in any way. They can be definitely annoying sometimes when they ruin a tame because you get too close to them and then they turn hostile. Definitely do not go too close to these things, as sometimes these things are absolutely brutal towards you as they can throw rocks and I think feces as well. I think they mainly do that when they're wild. You may not be able to do that when they're tamed. Either way, if you were wondering about that odd taming method, you have to passive tame these things beer, which is a resource which definitely takes a lot of time to gather itself. Well, you can't really gather it, you have to make it over time. But either way, you do have to gather the resources to craft it, and it just seems a very weird thing to give to a creature to actually tame it. You think you'll probably passive feed this thing berries, but no, the devs decided beer was definitely the way to go, because apparently these things are alcoholics now. I guess if you really did want to go to a pub in Ark, you'd probably just find yourself with loads and loads of Chalak Ethereums. I'll give this thing a 6 out of 10. Next up we have the Coelacanth. Definitely a creature which really shouldn't be an Ark tame, and actually you have to tame this thing by putting it in a fishing basket. Then when you take it out of the fishing basket, you'll have yourself a tamed Coelacanth. These things can't attack. I don't think they can store anything. They may have an inventory, they may not. Either way, these things are near useless, and actually it's one of the worst creatures in Ark. It's not annoying in any way, it's not hard to get, just it isn't particularly useful. I'll give it a 2 out of 10. Next up, we have ourselves the Compy, or the Compsognathus, whatever way you want to say it. Really, I'm just going to say Compy because it's so much shorter. The Compy is a very interesting tame, as it only will take prime meat, or I think kibble as well. No creature doesn't take kibble, so it will take kibble, but this thing does not take any kind of raw meat. Also, its torpor drops insanely fast, even faster than the Gigas. These things are not worth the time to tame. They are not great creatures. Do not tame one of these things. I'll give it a 1 out of 10. But before we get into number 1, I just want to quickly talk about this channel having a membership. And if you really like the content I do here, then consider subscribing up to a channel membership, as I will put up exclusive polls where you will get 3 new pieces of content every week exclusive to the members based on what content you want to see. Apart from 100 days series, obviously, as at this time I do not have the time to output content like that. But if all of that sounds good to you, check the channel membership, and if you would really like to support the channel, it would really help out if you would join down below. Lastly, we have to talk about crystal wyverns. Yes, you may say this is a wyvern, so it doesn't begin with C, but in terms of every creature beginning with C, the crystal wyvern is right at the end of that list, so that is why it is on this list. Actually, compared to the normal wyvern, the crystal wyvern is definitely a great shout. And I know there are loads of variants as well. In this case, I've got myself a water one, I think it is, but I think there are things like blood wyverns and other things like that. The wyvern variety with crystal wyverns is really cool. And actually their taming method is very interesting as well. These are a passive tame, unlike normal wyverns where you steal their eggs from trenches and you just have to feed them the crystals of the area. I think there are some specific crystals that you need. You can't just feed them normal crystal. But these things are definitely a very interesting taming method. And if you manage to get into position where you can sit on their back, these things really aren't that hard to tame. And you don't even need your hand on the mouse or keyboard for most of it, as you can simply lie back and relax, and then when it tells you to feed it a crystal, you can simply feed it a crystal. And once tamed, these things are as versatile and as useful as a wyvern. They may have reduced stats, I don't quite know about that, but their speed and agility, stamina and weight, and I think their carryables all seem to be the same, which makes these things really useful. I give it a 10 out of 10. And anyway, that is the end of today's video. Sadly, this video has to come to an end, but also I want to know from you, what are your best creatures beginning with C? And I will see you all later. Bye.